a WFSB Plus original. This is the Capitol Rundown.
Thank you for streaming with us today. I'm Kara Sundlin. Welcome to the Capitol Rundown. This is where we break down Connecticut politics that affect you from both sides of the aisle, and we have our insiders to help us make sense of it all. And we have former Republican House Leader Themis Klarides and Democratic strategist Jimmy Tickey coming here every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and of course we'll post it online afterwards. But thank you both for being with us. I feel like every time you come, there's a million things that have happened.
And a million things that have happened from when we spoke yesterday or
Yes.
Monday. That's the other thing.
Constant news, truly
Right.
24/7.
It really is. We're in a cycle, as we have been. But let's just talk about the Trump tariffs and cuts. I know that these are coming in at the federal level, but we can't not wonder how we're being affected here in Connecticut. Let's start with just even the economy. My daughter was asked to go take pictures for a school project of like groceries before, and then I guess she'll have to go back and a little bit after they, will affect our grocery prices.
Mm-hmm.
But let's start with you, Jimmy. As far as the tariffs, what can we expect, or what do we need to understand for how it's affecting our lives?
Right, it will affect our lives. Look, tariffs are a tax, and sometimes tariffs are a good thing with countries like China. But what the president has done so far is put tariffs on some of our allies in our neighboring countries like Canada and Mexico. And these tariffs will make a difference in the life of consumers. From Canada, we get so many home appliances, we get energy, we get lumber, we even get alcohol imported from Canada. And they said they would respond with 25% tariffs as well. For Mexico, we get so many of our fresh fruits and vegetables. So for billionaires, they don't have to worry about the price of a dishwasher or a washing machine, but the cost will be passed down to consumers, and businesses are not going to be eating these costs of increased taxes and tariffs. They're going to be passing it on to the consumers.
Themis, what do you think?
Well, I mean, we just saw the president put the tariffs on auto, steel, and aluminum, and clearly that's going to affect us, particularly in regard to cars. And we're going to see on April 2nd the reciprocal tariffs going in place. But to Jimmy's point, when he said tariffs are good for places like China, and I understand what he meant. We put tariffs on countries who are doing things that we don't agree with, are hurtful to us, are harmful to us and our citizens. And I agree with that. But when you look at Canada, for example, and we already have tariffs. I mean, we have millions and millions of dollars of tariffs on us already from Canada. Okay. So at a certain point, you have to look at, you're doing it to us, so why shouldn't we be putting it on you? So that's one thing. And I mean, the dairy tariffs, for example, that we already have from Canada. When we buy dairy, there's a threshold. And if we don't go over that threshold, the tariffs aren't paid. And they say we haven't gone over the threshold, I think maybe ever, and we probably only get to 50% of the threshold. So my point to it is, I think we have to find a happy medium where, we're going to put tariffs on you, China, because we don't agree with what you're doing. We don't agree with how you deal with people. We don't agree with how you treat people. We don't agree with how you treat us. And we're going to put tariffs on so we can maybe move your behavior. But we also have to be very cognizant of how it affects our citizens too, and the affordability, especially in a world that's been teetering in this country on recession for a few years.
Well, and the president actually in an interview did mention that he couldn't rule a recession out, which of course made the markets go crazy that day. But let me ask you, there are plenty of Republicans who say, hey, this is good. We have to make things fair for American workers. We're going to go through a bump, but it's going to get better. What do you think about that sentiment, that it's going to be rough, but ultimately we're going to end up better off?
Well, I think that's a generality, right? I mean, the question is, what does the bump look like? Mm-hmm. Right? If it's a month or two and things are, maybe you have to buy a little less of that or a little less of this, that's one thing. But I think if we're dealing with, this is going to drive us right into a recession, then it's a problem. And I think that's my point of, we have to balance what the pro is and what the con is. If it's going to affect the economy too much and hurt, the middle class and hurt everybody from top to bottom, not just the billionaires. I mean, let's be honest, in this world of, 2025, being a millionaire is not so hot either, right? I mean, I had a nine-year-old family member that said, are you a giga millionaire? We're like, what are you even saying? I mean, nowadays, like, a millionaire is not even a big deal anymore. I mean, not that it's not, clearly it's a lot of money. Yeah. But I mean, it affects people all the way up and down down the road. I mean, if you have 4 children and you have to go to, like you're dealing with going to college, next year and a couple years later, I mean, this is expensive. This world is expensive, and we cannot afford $9 dozen eggs. We can't.
The eggs
I
are.
don't care how much, but clearly you're hurting the working class more, but it's hurting everybody, and it's not good for the economy.
Nobody likes to spend too much. I'll let you finish real quick, and then I want to
Yes, the uncertainty is really what's devastating. I mean, of course, if someone's playing in the stock market, the uncertainty has been so bad that you just don't know what you're going to get, and people's 401ks have really taken a hit. But for those that couldn't even dream about being in the stock market but are going to the store to get their eggs and get their grocery prices, they are seeing an increase in those prices, and it's all very unnecessary to have these Trump tariffs on our allies. It comes with a great cost.
Okay, so we're also talking about the federal cuts. I know in our program a couple weeks ago, we talked about there are federal workers in Connecticut that have already lost their job. But recently, it's been making news this week that these cuts will affect the most needy as far as food and food donations, specifically places like Food Share. Themis, I know you actually also sit on the board of Food Share. They're asking for the governor to get involved. They want a $10 million bipartisan bill in Connecticut. That they're worried about the people who are going hungry. Can you expand and your view, and does this need to be done?
Well, so people understand, Food Share is our statewide food bank that covers the whole state of Connecticut. And if you think that your town is more affluent and doesn't need it, think again, because we're in almost every town and city in the state of Connecticut. Almost 160 food banks have fed over 1 million people in the past 2 years. And just so people understand, over 90% of our funds, what we buy food with, are private donations. Okay? Only 10% are government donations, and almost all of that is federal. I mean, the state of Connecticut gives less money per capita than any state in the country to our statewide food bank, Food Share, except for Texas, which to me is shameful. 1 in 8 people are food insecure in the state, and 1 in 6 children. I mean, if you think about that, we're either 1, 2, or 3 wealthiest state in the country.
And the cuts are really going to affect that.
The cuts are going to affect it because there's a program, a food program that allows us to buy food from local farmers. Over $1 million worth of food from local farmers. And any of us, I mean, we live in a small state. We all know local farmers. We all supportive of them, regardless, Republican, Democrat. That's not the issue. It's small business. It's small farms. And the money we buy from farmers. So we're hurting farmers with a $10 million cut. We're hurting schools because, I mean, think about the obesity problem in this country. And buying local produce and local food allows the schools who get reimbursed for spending this money that they're buying from farmers, is teaching kids how to eat healthier. You're hurting schools, you're hurting kids, and you're hurting farmers, and I think it's completely unacceptable.
Okay. So, Jim, you weigh in on this as well. I mean, it sounds like we're understanding that this money comes from the federal government. It's not going to be there anymore because of Trump cuts, and so do you think the state needs to fill in?
Right. Working people rely on these sorts of programs, and these programs are supported by the federal government. And so once again, when President Trump and Elon Musk take out their chainsaw and they just remove these programs, it has a real direct effect on people in Connecticut and all across the country. So for Connecticut, again, it is our small farmers that really had a steady revenue stream in getting these amounts of funds to make sure that they could sell their local produce to local schools. It's a loss for kids, as was mentioned, because we had programs in local schools to make sure they were having good food and nutrition programs at a local level, partnering with farms and schools. Now that is no longer there. And to our food pantries. Our food pantries are really important. I was involved in the United Way for many years, and there's a group of people called ALICE, Asset Limited Income Constrained. These are folks that really do live paycheck to paycheck, and if the car breaks down, they're really stuck. And so our food pantries, and we saw this throughout COVID, they really are a place that can just help a family in a short term. Now they risk their shelves not being stocked, and this is all, again, unnecessary by the Trump cuts.
Will the bill get passed? I guess we have a bill right now that they want to see passed.
Right. I mean, everybody's working on it. I mean, I know the Republicans put in an amendment when they were in session last week or the week before, which didn't pass, to try and help fill this gap. I really hope that both parties can get together and do this because, I mean, when you live in a state like Connecticut and 1 in 8 adults and 1 in 6 kids are food insecure, that's just shameful and should not happen. And you have an organization, you hear about people, all these organizations that are like, oh, the government, supports everything you do. You're just a government this, government that. Over 90% of Food Share's money comes from private donations, which means they're doing their part above and beyond. And I think government needs to also. The thing that confuses me And if we weren't on TV right now, I'd probably say a bad word, but I won't. The agency said the food program no longer effectuates the goals of the agency. This is what the federal agency said. No longer effectuates the goal of the agency. Helping kids get nutritious food and helping support farmers and helping food insecurity, that's not effectuating the goal of the agency. If that's not the goal of an agency, then I don't know what is.
Right. So we're going to switch topics here and talk about this horrible crime in Waterbury that now people are wondering, was this a DCF failure? You've got a man who's 32 years old. He weighs 68 pounds. He claims he was held captive for 20 years. We just spoke to a woman who claims she is his half-sister, says she's been trying to reach him, that she wants him to know he's loved, and she believes that this stepmother was cruel to him, maybe because it wasn't her own child. Whatever the reason, some are saying, how is Governor Lamont going to get involved? How is the state legislature going to get involved? We don't always hear that about crime, but in this case, was this a DCF failure, and should government be involved now? Jimmy?
Well, this is a truly tragic and cruel case, and I know the details are still being released on what exactly happened, but as you said, Kara, this was, as a boy, apparently, in the 4th grade, he was removed from school. He was apparently eating other students' lunches. In retrospect, he might have been malnourished to begin with. And so then he vanishes from school. He's now 32. Come to find out, he's been locked up in this room, like an 8x8 room, for 20 years. So how does someone like this fall through the cracks? And so there needs to be an investigation to see, how does this happen, from localities, authorities, school, DCF. How does this happen? Have an investigation, and people need to be held accountable. I mean, what happened to wellness checks and to checking in on people, whether that's the school or the town or neighbors? It's just, something is wrong with this, and we need that investigation to show where were there slip-ups in the process to make sure that something like this cannot happen again.
I mean, Themis, someone did show up and check on this, but I don't know what laws we need, or I know DCF, they have a hard job to do, but apparently they were told to go away, and we don't have any evidence that there was a lot coming back after that.
You know, and not only did the school notice that the boy was, at a young age, 20 years ago, was stealing other kids' lunches, he was also going through the garbage, you know, which are signals, right, to especially an educator, that something's not right, that he was hungry. So they did go to the home, and they were told everything was fine. Now, to me, there needs to be more intense investigation on things. Now, you hear stories about parents that are like, I don't want Big Brother and government, involved in my life. I'm going to raise my kids the way I want to raise my kids. And I get that to a certain extent. Everybody raises their children in a different way. But there should be certain parameters, and certainly locking somebody in a room and not feeding them properly is, I don't think any of us disagree with that.
Right.
I will just say this, DCF has a very difficult job to do, but they are constantly under scrutiny. The entire time I was in the legislature, there was DCF this, DCF that. I don't understand. I mean, that boy was pulled out of school soon after that incident, and that should have been another red flag.
But we allow homeschooling pretty liberally here.
We do, but we also, there are parameters or which parents have to, or whoever's homeschooling that child, have to follow. I would bet you that those parameters were not reached, because if you're being malnourished and stuck in a room, you can't really think clearly, and you're not healthy, and so I'm sure you're not learning properly. I'm sure we're going to find out there were a lot of things that were wrong here, but DCF and the state have to stay on top of things, and if you have a gut feeling if something's wrong too, I'm sure when the police went there, and that they have their constraints, they can only go so far, right? And DCF can only go so far, with the laws are in place, and maybe we need stricter laws.
And maybe more coordination also, right? And thinking, if the school is acting on behalf of the schools, local authorities for the local authorities, DCF for themselves, how can we better coordinate all of these resources together, so if one person sees something, that they share it with other agencies?
I mean, you were in the legislature for many years. Do you think that the safety net's not there? Is there just too much bureaucracy, and so things like this can happen? Does something have to change?
I think coordination certainly is one thing. I think, and I'm sure the police spoke with DCF, because DCF, if the school saw something was wrong, the school calls DCF, I believe, and then DCF calls the police. I think that's the order of which things go. But I think the coordination has to be better, and I think maybe the laws need to be more strict in regards to what you're saying, because here's the problem. If I go to a house and I see something, and you go to a house and you see something, and you go to a house, we may we may observe it in different ways. Right now, we're trained as law enforcement officers to look and see things in the way we're supposed to. But I just find it difficult to believe they went to this house, just because the stepmom said, oh, he's fine. I mean, is that okay to take? I think it needs to be more aggressive, to be honest with you. And I also think that once that kid was taken out of school, there needed to be more follow-up. I think we're going to hear there may have been or there may not have been. But something like this should never, ever happen in any state.
Right.
So both of you, it sounds like, from both sides of the aisle, would support some sort of legislative change that would create more check-ins or more something.
And it may mean more training, too, on the part of law enforcement and DCF. I mean, that may be a situation, too, that you maybe see what they're seeing. Maybe needs to be more training, or it may be there may be somebody with the specific training that went in to look instead of the people that did. I mean, there could be any one of a number of examples and changes that can be made.
Yeah, I'll ask one more follow-up before we move on to this interesting Easter Sunday snafu, but there has been a lot written that DCF is underfunded or that they don't have enough people. I think a lot of agencies are struggling, of course. Is that what you think? Jimmy, do you think that DCF needs more people, more funding?
Well, they need to follow through on these cases, and I'm sure they have, but then what is that follow through, and what does it lead to? I saw a report that said that folks did go out to the family's house, and the family actually then called a harassment case on the authorities that knocked on their door. So there was probably maybe an antagonistic relationship there where they did not want those sort of check-ins. So the question is, if we do a full review, what are the takeaways, and what can we do to make sure that there's more check-ins on people? I mean, this was a young boy who was taken out of school and then vanishes. So it's about the resources, it's about the coordination, and it's also about, a lot of police departments have already begun to bring in mental health responders and more resources that are in addition to just police officers to think about a full wraparound of services for their towns. And maybe there are ways that we can really re-envision the way that we're reaching out to communities and to homes like this, that clearly something more needed to be done in this situation to flag that there was a situation here, there was an individual locked in a room for 20 years. I mean, there must be more done so that something like this does not happen.
It's unbelievable, the
It
story.
is.
But I want to talk about Easter Sunday, something that both of you made me aware of. There's some sort of problem with the way some early voting law was written, and poll workers are really upset, thinking that I'm going to have to work on Easter Sunday. Themis, can you explain what's going on? And let's hope that's not the case.
Well, when the early voting law was passed, when we started early voting last year, there was, and this happens a lot. I mean, I will say, laws are passed, and say a date is different one year than the next year, and you realize in this example that when early voting started last year, the dates that it starts this year land on Easter Sunday.
Okay.
All right.
So meaning like it could start on, say, March 30th or whatever.
And it just happens to be. And last year it wasn't, and this year it is. And so, it became known. I mean, is Shelton the only town?
Shelton is the only town currently for this special
election.
election.
And you can speak to that, but you guys let it be known. And long story short, it's moving along the legislature now. I know the House and Senate Republicans are ready to go with it and move it forward. It's just a fix in the law. Is really all it is. It's not
Right.
political. It's not controversial. It just is something that you didn't know until it actually landed that way.
It's a clerical error.
Right.
But tell us,
Yes.
Lisa, you have a special election
Well, I'm
in your
from
town.
Shelton. I'm from Shelton, and Easter happens to be one of my favorite holidays. And so I get a call from the Register of Voters saying, we're not working on Easter. Do you know that we have to work on Easter? So I wanted to understand this with my own eyes, and I looked, and yes, the legislature passed early voting, which was a good thing. So everyone negotiated and came to these 4 days of early voting. So you get 4 days to vote early, but excluded are a list of holidays, state and federal holidays. For example, Good Friday is a state holiday, so they're not working the Friday before Easter. However, it said March 31st, 2024. That was Easter of last year. It didn't put Easter in perpetuity. So a bit of an error. They meant to include Easter, clearly because they had March 31st, 2024. So you have people who do want to spend time with their families on one of these high holy days, and they don't want to work at the polling places. They already give a lot of their time, even more now with early voting. So I agree. I think it's a legislative fix. The legislature is in right now before April 22nd, which is the special election date. They can fix this in Shelton, specific to Shelton. These special elections happen. Sometimes legislators don't take the oath of office. They get another job. So sometimes at the top of the year, you do see some of these special elections. And we need to make sure that we're protecting some of these important state state and federal holidays and notable holidays to make sure poll workers are not working on these days. We can still satisfy the 4 days, maybe
Okay.
not Easter Sunday.
Big
And
whoopsie, and it'll probably get fixed. Is
And
that
I
the
need
bottom
to
line?
mention, okay, I spoke with leadership on the Republican side who are ready to do it. I had Jimmy talk to leadership on his side of the aisle so they can move forward. But I feel I need to mention that this year, Orthodox Easter, I am Greek Orthodox, falls on the same day as your Easter,
Easter Sunday.
as we like to call American Easter, and my husband goes crazy when I say that. But that's only every 5 years. So what would happen if it were this year? It was 2 different Easters, and I made it clear that I would like Orthodox Easter moved into that since we're making changes.
Any
Because
kind
why-
of Easter.
Because why should I have to work, or my people have to work on Easter, right?
Okay. All right. So we'll end it there. That you think it's going to look good. They're going to get it fixed, and
Yes.
the poll workers will be able to have Easter Sunday at home.
Yes.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, that's where it's heading. So you heard it here first. This is the Capitol Rundown. Thanks for watching this with us. You can find it WFSB.com. If you want to watch the whole episode later or share it, go WFSB.com, click on local news. You'll find our show. Follow us all on social media. We'll be sharing clips there as well. Thank you, insiders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.